I really wanted to start by looking at what would be the ideal student experience with Microsoft 365 and what would we want students to see in their devices throughout the year, at the end of the year. What would be the ideal experience? So they get the device at the beginning of the year. We want them to easily sign in with their credentials. And when they get to the desktop, they should have all the applications that they need for a great learning experience already installed. The device should also be configured for use of this student specifically. And they would already be added to the relevant classes in Teams so that they could interact with their students, with their teachers throughout the year. They should also have access to all the documents they have been working on. And with OneDrive, they would have all the list of things, assignments that they have been working on, even if they had it, they were working on it on a different device. They could leverage the touchpad of their device in case they have it to create small notes. If they access Edge, they already have their account signed in without them having to do anything else. And the same for PowerPoint. They would already be signed in and they could easily access the files they have been working on the latest. In Edge, they would be able to see their favorites. They would be able to see collections they might have created in order to complete their assignments. When they try to access Minecraft, they would be able to interact with their fellow colleagues and teachers. If they want to install applications that are not yet on their device, they could go to Company Portal, which works as a private store, and they could download the applications from there as they would be available. Lastly, at the end of the year, in the exam season, they would be able to leverage Take a Test, which is an application that locks down the device in order for them to run a specific exam. And this, while they are running that exam, they wouldn't be able to go to the browser and research something else. It would be completely locked down until they complete that exam. But what is necessary to make this great student experience, and how can we enable this for our students? So the first step is always identity, and I won't go too much in depth on this topic because you'll have a session in this afternoon to go over this. But the way that we achieve this great experience is to make sure that our students have cloud-connected identities. These identities could then access to the apps that we have enabled, and those apps being installed on devices, they would be able to easily enable single sign-on, which is when they don't have to insert their credentials in order to access some of these applications. Then we need to make sure that our cloud apps are available, that they can be leveraged by our students. And the way that we do that is to make sure that they get to our devices in a seamless way without having to rely on manual tasks in order for these applications to be installed there. This is only possible because our cloud-connected identities exist in Microsoft's Azure Active Directory that you'll learn about this afternoon and a bit more. And our apps are enabled also there. This authentication to these apps utilizes Microsoft Azure Active Directory. And also our devices have to be somehow registered or have a record in Microsoft Azure Active Directory in order for all of this to work seamlessly. And the way that we make sure this happens is through Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Microsoft Endpoint Manager is a group of technologies of which Microsoft Intune is part of. But also you have in this bucket, you have Windows Autopilot, Desktop Analytics, and Configuration Manager. But for this session, we are going to focus on Microsoft Intune. Microsoft Intune, we can manage our devices, make sure they have the settings and the applications that we need them to have. And also, because we have a registration, a record in Microsoft Azure Active Directory, we have here a connection between these two services. So we can have the seamless experience enabled. Okay, so let's look at how, let's look a little bit more into Microsoft Intune for Education and how to set it up and configure it. First of all, what is Microsoft Intune for Education? Well, it is a web portal that was designed specifically for education organizations. I'm going to show you in just a bit and walk you through it. But we also have another web portal that is a bit more complex and has other types of options more focused on enterprise. But we started to see that the education industry is completely different than enterprise. It has different needs. It has different ways of working. And so we thought having a web portal that is specifically designed with the most commonly used settings and applications for Intune for Education would be very beneficial for organizations. So that's why we have this specific one just for education. It allows organizations to easily manage devices throughout their life cycle. And it has integration with School Data Sync, which could be linked to your school information system. And this web portal specifically supports Windows and iPadOS. So let's look at the life cycle of device management. And here, it's all about how to make sure that devices, when they reach organizations, they can be easily brought to the Intune, to the device management service. They can be easily enrolled. But then at the end of a school year or a student's term, they can be easily repurposed for another student. So first of all, we need to think about how do we want to manage these devices? Are they going to be shared devices? Are they going to be used one-on-one by students or teachers? And what is the best method to make sure that they are brought to our? Then we want to make sure we provision these devices with the proper apps and settings so that the first time a student or a teacher opens that device and starts using it, it has all the person needs to work and do online learning, for instance. Then during the school year, we need to make sure that we are able to manage apps. Do they need additional applications? Do we need to uninstall some applications? Do we need to change the settings throughout the school year without having someone locally going to the device and doing it manually? And we need to make sure we have a proper way to report an inventory on these devices and to perform remote tasks, again, to avoid having someone going on site. At the end of the school year, we need to make sure that we can remotely factory reset or delete the device so that it is automatically ready for the next cycle and the next person who needs to use this device. Today, we are going to cover most of this cycle. But again, in the enrollment options, there are many enrollment options. So we'll focus only on the ones that organizations use the most. And Windows Autopilot is quite a broad topic. So tomorrow we'll deep dive on it and we'll focus on that enrollment method. We'll go through provisioning, how to deploy apps, how to deploy settings, and we'll talk a bit more about also iPadOS enrollment. Okay, so let's look at some general requirements that you will need to think about if you're thinking about device management using Microsoft Intune for Education. The first one is to have a proper subscription. It must have an Intune license on that subscription. And examples of subscriptions that have Intune license are Microsoft 365 A3 or A5. And optionally, in order for you to leverage this entire experience, to have Office 365 for Education license. Then we'll need to make sure that we have our cloud-connected identities. And if identity is currently local in Active Directory, you'll need to think about how to synchronize them to the cloud. So you'll need to think about Azure Active Directory Connect. If you have information in a school information system, you could leverage School Data Sync to make sure you have cloud-connected identities. Then, in terms of Windows and requirements for Windows, Microsoft Intune for Education supports Windows 10 version 20H2 or higher, and with Windows 11 is obviously supported as well. Then if you'd like to use Setup School PCs or Windows Configuration Designer, you'll need to install the applications, the correspondent applications, and you can go to the store to do it. And to utilize Windows Autopilot, you would need to have the information to submit the registration of those devices. Today we'll focus on the Setup School PCs and how to do it with that method. In iPadOS, you would need iPadOS 13 or higher, an Apple MDM push certificate, and optionally, if you want to leverage automated device enrollment, you would need to set up a token. And if you want to leverage volume purchase program to distribute applications, you would need to set up a token there. We are also going to go a bit more into this automated device enrollment, which is why I haven't gone through it too much right now. Okay. So throughout this session, I will show you a number of walkthroughs, and we'll try to see how this is done in practice. So this is the first one. I'm going to show you here the portal and what to look at to start with. So here we are in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and I'm showing this for you to know where you can find the links for the different admin centers. In this case, for Endpoint Manager, you have here a direct link, but I already have it open to show you. This Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center is the web portal that was initially, that is the most comprehensive web portal. It has all the settings that we have for device management, but it's very much focused on enterprise, which is why we have here the Intune for Education portal, which is specifically built for education. And here you will find settings that are suitable for education scenarios. And you'll have on the left menu with express configuration groups, devices, applications, and you can explore that a little bit. We are going to see many of these menus today. But to start with, the first thing you want to do when you start testing this is really to explore launch express configuration. This is the menu that will allow you to more quickly set up everything for a specific group or a specific school. So let's look into it now and see how it is working. So to start with, you'll have a couple of instructions here. You'll see that you need to set up a group. You need to choose some applications to install, and then some settings to apply to the devices. So we'll get started. And here you will have a list of schools, depending on the information that you have important from School Data Sync. And here I'm going to choose Contoso High School and students of Contoso High School. Okay, let's go next. Then it's the step where we can choose applications. You have here web applications. You have a couple here that you could choose. For today, I'm going to choose Windows applications. You can make sure that Microsoft Office Suite is installed on the devices of these students. And you could choose also Minecraft, for instance. Have here other desktop applications that you could leverage. Also, in this same menu, you could choose iOS applications if needed. So here we are going to choose Teams for the iPad OS devices of these students. Clicking next. After this step, we have here some categories of settings that we could choose from. A very important one here that most organizations used is configure the preferred Azure Active Directory tenant domain. And here, it wasn't me who experienced this, but one of the colleagues of my team, one of the first times they visited a school, they noticed that when students had a cloud-connected device, the first time that they were trying to sign in to that device, they would always get the login wrong. And they went there to try to understand what is the user experience and what's going on that is not going well. And they were working with second graders at the time. And besides the user of that second grader, they had to add the entire domain of the school in the login screen of Windows. So as you can imagine, they would always miss one letter and they would end up always failing the login. And it was simply because it was too complex for young kids. So that's when this one was added here to make sure that when they are logging into Windows, they only have to add their user account, their alias, but not the domain after. So you have a few more categories to explore here, but we'll also look into the settings in the next section of this session. So I'll go forward now and just show you. You could also block application store here so that students cannot install applications directly from the store. We would go next, and at the end, we have a review menu where you can see everything that you have set up for this group of students. And that's it. You can click done, and you're done. You have configured applications and settings for the devices of that specific group of students. So at this point, you could set up more groups or click all done and go back to the beginning. Let's see how to manage settings of devices in a more specific way. And here, it's important to start by talking about how to assign settings and how to make sure our settings reach the devices that we want them to reach. And here, these settings allow you to manage features on school devices, yes, and they will help enable the student experience that we have seen in the beginning, and make sure the devices are working properly for a specific group of students. But here it's important to think about how to assign them. In Microsoft Intune for Education, you can have groups with users and devices on them. If you assign settings to users, these settings will be applied to all the devices these users log into. So in a case of a shared device scenario, every time the users log in, settings assigned to that specific user are going to apply to the device. On the other hand, if the group that you're targeting for this settings has devices on them, these settings will apply no matter what user logs in. So they are device settings, they will apply to the device. Doesn't matter if it is a student that is signing in or a teacher. So it is important to think about how to do it. How do you want to do it? Who do you want these settings to apply to? Or if they should apply to a device, no matter who is using it. When it comes to settings, there are two different ways to manage settings in Intune for Education. You can leverage express configuration. This option we have just seen. We have just walk you through it. It has the most commonly used school settings, the settings that we have seen most schools need in order to enable the best student experience. On the other hand, if you need additional settings that are not in express configuration, we can go to groups and we'll find there an expanded list of settings and categories that you can configure to address those needs. So just to give you an idea, a comparison, when it comes to categories of Windows settings, if you explore express configuration, you'll see a small list of categories there: accounts and sign-ins, and sign-in apps, enrollment, Microsoft Edge, user experience. But then if you go to groups, you'll have more categories to choose from, and each category will have more settings to explore. So if you need network and connectivity, OneDrive and storage, power and sleep, printer, security, shared devices, updates and upgrades, which is always a topic that we see organizations take time to look at, or configure a take a test profile, you will then have to go to groups. Same logic applies for iPadOS. In express configuration, you have the most used categories of settings. Then if you go to groups, you have additional ones. And here in the groups one, update restrictions, for instance, will configure how these devices are updated. It's one of those that some organizations look at. Okay, so let's look into how this is done in practice. Here we have explored express configuration. Notice that you also have a tab here on the menu on the left to go through express configuration. And then you can choose groups in order to access those extra categories. In groups, you can expand Contoso High School, and you have here students of Contoso High School, the same group we have configured before in express configuration. Notice that the apps that we have assigned before are already here as 3 applications assigned. And in this menu, we can see how many users this group has, how many devices this group has. At the moment, 0. But you would be able, if you had devices of these students, you would be able to see a list here. You could select devices, sync, restart. You would be able to factory reset them in a remote way without having to go to the device in order to do it. You would also be able to see all the users of this group. And if you click on them, you would be able to see details around the user, what type of user type they have. In this case, it is a student. What are the group memberships? And here you see some classes this user is added to. Okay, you would have here a menu for apps. We are going to explore this in just a bit. But right now, let's go into Windows device settings. As you see here, you have a few more categories than we have seen in the Express configuration menu. If we go here to the accounts and sign-in, the setting that we have just configured in the Express configuration is here as well as configured. So you don't have to worry about configuring settings in one place or the other. Everything is replicated in the background to show you what is already configured. But here, a few settings that I wanted to show you. In browser, you would be able to manage home pages, and you could, for instance, configure here what is the home page that you want. You would be able to configure also the same for new tab. If you wanted a custom page for new tab, you would be able also to configure what is the default search engine of your browser. And here you have a few options. And importantly, if you want to block URLs, you could also leverage this list here to make sure that students do not access URLs they should not have permissions to do. As another example of something that is widely used, that is not on Express configurations, is the updates and upgrades category. Here you can configure how updates are being sent to your devices. You could say that devices should remain on a specific version so that you don't have different versions in your environment, and it's just easier to manage if they stick to the same version for a while at least. You could configure also how updates are installed and when does the reboot happen. This is very useful to make sure that the reboot doesn't happen during the school day, and that the way updates, the security updates are installed is a controlled way. So you can define exactly when does this happen and what time do you want them to happen, as an example. So these are just a couple of settings here that I wanted to show you. Let's see also some iOS device settings. Here again, you have a few more categories than before. One that we see is widely used is the lock screen, wallpaper, and home screen layout. And here, the home screen layout is an interesting one. It allows you to configure the layout of applications of a specific iPad OS, a specific tablet. And imagine a teacher has a classroom full of students. Each student has their own tablet. And whenever students have issues, the teacher, if the tablets are configured by the students or in a random way, the teacher would have to go to the student, find the application, because they would not be in the same place, and then help the student. With this home screen layout, what you can do is to make sure the applications are all in the same tiles. So they are all showing up in the same place. And when the teacher needs to help a student, they would know exactly where the application they should be working on is, because all the iPads would have exactly the same home screen layout. And you could also configure a folder, give it a name, and from here, you could configure which applications would go on the folder so that you would have a folder here as well. This is all I had in terms of settings to show you. These are just a couple of examples. Of course, if you go back, you see here that you have a number of others to explore. The recommendation would be to try and understand what do you need for your students, what would benefit their experience. And then from there, you can come here, you could search settings if you don't know where to find them, and you would have an easy way to find settings that you might need. So leverage this search bar. It is also available in the Windows device settings menu. And you will see here if you have any settings available additionally or not. Tomorrow, on the session, on the part 2 of this session, we'll also see additional capabilities that you can leverage on the Microsoft Endpoint Manager portal. And that's because you can use both portals as needed. This one is designed for education, but everything is synchronized between them in the background. So you could use one or the other as it is needed. So if a setting is not available in this menu, chances are it is going to be available in Microsoft Endpoint Manager portal. When it comes to applications, you can find applications in 3 different places. Well, you have 3 different types of applications to start with. You can, in Intune for Education, you can manage web applications, store applications that are synchronized from the Microsoft Store for Education and the Apple App Store also. And here there's an option that would require an Apple ID from the user, but there's also an option that is seamless, which is this VPP, Volume Purchase Program. It is a program from Apple, and what you can do with Microsoft Intune is to create a connection between our portal, our service, and Apple to make sure that this seamless experience can be leveraged. But if you need to learn more about this, Volume Purchase Program is the way that you can search for it. Also, you are here, it is available for you to deploy Windows desktop applications. Intune for Education supports line of business applications. You can check here your assignments of Win32 apps, which enable the deployment of executables and MSIs. We'll see how to configure, how to create Win32 applications tomorrow. And you can also make sure the students' devices get Microsoft 365 apps and the browser Edge. Again, with applications, a very important factor to consider is how to assign them. If you assign them to users, the applications will be associated with them. The assignment that you make there, it will travel with the user from device to device. If you assign them to devices, you are installing applications in devices no matter who signs into that device. With applications, you can assign them in 2 different ways. First way is the mandatory application assignment or required. What it does is to seamlessly send applications to devices. So end users wouldn't have to do anything. Applications would just be automatically installed on the devices that you assign as a mandatory application. The second method is available. Available makes sure that the applications are available, are visible in the company portal. The company portal is an application that works as a private store. It works as a place where you can check applications that your admins have prepared for you as an end user and install them if needed. So they are optional applications. When it comes to applications, there are 3 different ways to manage them in Intune for Education. The first one we have explored is Express configuration. The second one is again through groups, like we have seen with settings, but we are going to see it again for the application specifically. And the third one is using the apps menu. This is also where you can add new applications to the list. Okay, let's take a quick look into how to manage applications. So we are again in the group of students of Contoso High School, and we have here a menu for applications. We can choose web applications, and these web applications are applicable for Windows and for iOS. They are applicable for both platforms. Here we see that our group does not have any web applications right now, so we can add it to add some applications to our group. In this case, I'm going to add Schoolology Learning, could be a good one, and then I would save. And we have here our application. Notice here that our application is a required application. So it's going to be an application that is going to be installed in our devices without any user interaction. It's going to be pushed to our devices. Let's look at Windows applications. And here we already have some applications. In this menu, we'll see the applications that have already been assigned to this group. We have done this while we were configuring Express configuration, and you can see it here as assigned. But if we want to add additional ones, we could add it and add from this list. Let's do whiteboard. Likewise, if you go to iOS applications, you will be able to see the application we have configured. And if you want more, you could configure more applications for this group. Notice here that these applications are synchronized from our iOS VPP, Volume Purchase Program token. This is the program that enables a seamless installation of applications without any Apple ID required. So the third menu where we can configure applications is the apps menu that you find here on the left. We see here all the applications that are available. We can, for instance, search for Edge, and Edge is here. We could assign it by clicking on it. We could check group assignments, and we could add groups. And here, notice that the logic of assignment is a bit different. We have first selected the application that we want to assign, and now we are selecting the assignments. Likewise, if you wanted to add more applications, you could come here and you could select new applications to add. Let's go through some terminology. This is important because in the documentation, you'll see this a lot. So out-of-box experience is the stage before the device gets to the desktop. It's when you have a device in a box, you take it out the first time, you turn it on, until it gets to the desktop, we consider it to be on the out-of-box experience. Many enrollment methods require the device to be on this stage in order to function. Then when it comes to devices, when you're thinking about how to manage them, you really have to think about who is going to use them. Are these devices going to be shared devices between students, between teachers? Are they going to be one-on-one devices? Are they personal devices? Are they devices that students are bringing in to the organization in order to have resources? Or are they owned by the school or organization? And lastly, how are these devices going to communicate with our services, with Azure Active Directory? How are they going to create that record that we started the session talking about? They could be Azure AD registered, Azure AD joined, or hybrid Azure AD joined. When it comes to Intune enrollment, we need to think about who is going to perform it. Are we going to leverage end users to make sure this enrollment happens? Are we going to use accounts in order for the enrollment to finish? Or are we going to enroll these devices without a user affinity, without users associated with the device itself? As a first step to prepare enrollment, it's very important to consider enrollment restrictions. How many devices do you need to enroll per user? You can configure here what is the maximum number, and for security reasons, you could make it lower than the maximum the service allows to make sure that each user cannot enroll more than that. Then you can check how device platforms are allowed. If they are just allowed completely, or if you want to restrict the operating system minimum and max version, if you want to restrict personal devices from connecting. We are going to very briefly look into these enrollment restrictions so that you can have an idea of how to configure it. And for this one, we would have to go back to the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. Simplified, okay. We would go to Devices. Here you can go to Enroll Devices, and you have the restrictions, both of them here. Let's go to the first one. This restriction policy has a default policy. This default policy has a device limit of 5. But let's create a new one to see what are the options. You can see here the device limit, and you can see that the device limit goes until 15. However, for security reasons, if you know that your students don't need to enroll that many devices, it might be more sensible to choose a lower number. But yes, you can choose here how many do you need. I'm going to choose 15 for now, just for this test. You could assign scope tags for delegated administration, and then you would be able to assign it to a group, students of Contoso High School. And then you would have a review. Notice that the priority here for this one is higher than the default. So that means that for users assigned with this restriction applies first. Only then the default restriction applies. So here you also have to consider the priority that you apply to each restriction. You can change here if you would have, if you would have more restrictions, you would be able to change the priority between each restriction. Okay, let's look briefly into device platform restrictions. And notice here that you are able to configure restrictions for each one of the platforms. But let's look into the default one and properties, and let's edit the platform settings. So here you have an overview of all the platforms and what are the restrictions associated with each one of them. In this case, all platforms are allowed, but imagine that you do not anticipate needing to manage macOS devices. You could simply block the restriction here. For security reasons, you should do it to make sure that no device is connected. Also, students could, by mistake, enroll devices that they do not want to. So you should consider this platform and what platforms to block when you're thinking about device management. You have here options to control the versions that are allowed to enroll, and you could block personally owned devices. So if all devices are going to be owned by schools, you probably do not have to have this enabled. And the easiest way to make sure that devices are not enrolled by mistake by students is really to block all the personally owned devices. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. As mentioned before, there are many options that available, and the options that you choose really depend on how do you want the device to be managed, who is going to use the device, and what is the purpose of the device. For end user enrollment, you have to think that this device is going to be tied to a user. So these methods are suitable for one-to-one type of enrollment or type of use. And here, during Windows out-of-box experience, you have some methods that work. Then Windows Autopilot requires the device to be on the out-of-box experience, so that menu before the desktop. But you can also Azure Active Directory join the device during that out-of-box experience. After the device has gone through out-of-box experience, you can only join it to Intune through the settings or by installing the Intune Company Portal application. However, this makes it so that the device is going to be tagged as a personal device and not as a corporate one. So really consider how is the best way to approach. To do it from the start on the out-of-box experience or to do it later. If you have hybrid Azure AD join devices, then you can also leverage group policy. And if they are in Configuration Manager, you could enable co-management to bring them to cloud management as well. If devices are going to be shared and they need to be used by different people, they cannot be tied to one user only. Provisioning packages with Setup School PC or Windows Configuration Designer could be a good option. We're going to explore that in just a bit. And Windows Autopilot with self-deploying mode allows you to bring devices without any user account. So what is Setup School PC? Well, it is an application that is designed for education, but ultimately what we'll be doing with that application is to configure a provisioning package for our devices. Usually it is used for bulk enrollment when we have many devices that we need to quickly enroll. And what this provisioning package does is to Azure AD join the device. It will install predefined applications that that we have seen are important for education. You can include them or not. It will apply customizations, and it can be optimized for shared devices. So let's walk through how this works in practice. Here I have a video to show you. In order for you to use Setup School PCs, you need to install the application from the Microsoft Store. And when you start it, you'll see this menu. And you'll see that you have the possibility to configure this with 3 different steps. The first step is to create this provisioning package. Choose the settings, choose the applications for the student PC. Then at the end of this wizard, you'll have the possibility to save this provisioning package to 1 or more USB drives that can be used later. Then you just have to plug in the USB drives to the devices when they are in the out-of-box experience. So to start with, you'll name your provisioning package. You'll have to sign in with your school's account in order to connect to your organization. You'll need to configure a wireless network to make sure the device has access to network when it turns on. You need to configure the version of Windows the devices will be running. You have a few more settings here that you could configure, including the preferred Azure Active Directory domain name. You could configure a device name template if needed. Then also select time zone. You could configure take a test if you have any exams that need to be taken. Here you have the applications that could be installed in case you need them. And at the end, you have a summary with everything that you have configured. Now you select the USBs that you would like this provisioning package to be saved to. You could select several at the same time. And you're done. You just have to connect those USB drives to the devices that you need to configure. Let's quickly check how does this work. So this is a device where a USB drive has been connected. So this is still the out-of-box experience, not the provisioning package. Now we see installing provisioning packages. And you'll start seeing a list of everything that is going to be done with this provisioning package in order to configure this device. And after everything is configured, you get to the sign-in screen and you're able to go. Obviously, in real life, it takes a bit longer for these settings to apply, but it's not a timely process. When you get to the device, you have everything there that has already been configured, and you start seeing some of the applications come down to the device and getting installed. Okay, I still want to show you very briefly an iPadOS enrollment scenario. But here you have more or less the same options. On an end user enrollment side, you can enroll devices with the user account, and that device will be tied to that user. But you can use it through automated device enrollment, which is a program from Apple that Intune connects to so that it is enabled for device management in Intune as well. You can leverage Apple Configurator with Setup Assistant, or you can manually install the company portal and log in from there. With this last one, again, the device would be showing up in the portal as a personal device. So it's only suitable if you are allowing students to bring devices to the platform. On the other side, on the right side, you see the bulk enrollment options. Again, you have automated device enrollment, but without user affinity, without the user account tied to that device. It is used more for shared iPads and for user-less scenarios. And the same for Apple Configurator. Let's look at the experience that you'll have on the automated device enrollment. So first option is always to choose network, because our profiles and the information that we are sending to the device always comes via the network, via internet. Then you're installing the remote management profile, and you start seeing all the applications come down to the device. They get installed automatically without any prompt to the user. And after a while, you see the background changes with the configurations that you have set up. You also start seeing the start menu layout that was configured. You start seeing it here as well. And then if you start Minecraft, you are able to use it with our student account. It is signed in and ready to be used there.